So when I was thinking about what I'm going to do next, one thing that I was reading Alex Tison's article in the Atlantic, where it got a lot of like Filipinos and other non-Filipinos talking about servitude. And I thought about how do we create suffering within our own people, within our own selves, in the diaspora. So that's like one of the big questions that came up. How do we manifest that same thing that we discussed, the colonized mind, that sense of power over other people? And then on top of that, based on that article where Alex Tison was so broken about it. And so the question then, how do we feel as Filipino Americans being in the land of former masters, but in reality still our master? So that was like my goal. It's like the next piece that I'm going to do is that it has to have that sense of hope. So within the story, the questions is like that we were exploring. So what keeps us going? What makes us stay? What makes people stay? What makes, our American ancestors stay? And so we had a community convening, and I'm like asking, so who is the Filipino American deity? What are the qualities of a deity, period? And so we had, I think, 3 public community convenings, because I was just like lost as to how do we approach this. And one of the things that came out was that a deity has had to suffer. To become a deity, you must suffer, and you must overcome that suffering. And then the next question was, who's our deity? As Filipino Americans as Filipinos in the diaspora in America. And people start naming, not people, but the concept of what they would like a deity be. Went back, and I'm like talking to my collaborators, and I'm like, what's interesting is that nobody mentioned the Manongs, the first generation who came here. They suffered. Many of them came through because we have 3rd, 4th, 5th generation Americans that are here, so that means that they survived. Nobody mentioned them. And so I'm like, I don't think I can move forward with this piece about diasporic experience, contemporary ones, without looking back to before and where did we come from. And these are our deities. And so I feel like those stories are not available to us in Asian American studies. Like what we know of the Manong is that they dance, they work really hard, they dance, they chase white women, like all of the cliches. They dressed up to, in their Macintosh, and we have all the pictures. They're good looking, they have rhythm, they can dance really well. And if there was a Pinay, then they take care of them. There'll be 10 of them going to the movies and all of that. And it's all very much like, kuyas that are taking care of this one Pinay, this orchid. And I'm like, okay, looking at, historical essays, and, going back to the Sakada in Hawaii, they were saying there were at one point 100,000 Filipinos in Hawaii, and 1 in 14 was Pinay. Wow. I'm like, hold on. How come we don't hear about the Filipino stories, right? Or even there were 30,000 Filipinos in the mainland. 1 out of 20 is Filipina. We, my crew and I just, let's dig. And so one of them found this 1930 letter or essay by Helen Hilliera, I think is her name. She's like 14 at the time, and she's 14, and she wrote this thing, and she talked about, you know, being forced to, or having to be pressured to go to a taxi dance hall with these Pinoy men, you know, all 15 of them, or like, and having an issue of who do they pick to dance with. And then, of course, she will pick somebody who she knows, and then there will be a fight, and there will be stabbings, you know. Like, this is something that we don't hear about. This is from the 1930s. So I'm like, this is interesting. A friend of mine who's fourth generation Filipino American has talked about his grandmother, who was born in Hawaii. And she was, you know, she came to San Francisco after Pearl Harbor, and became the singer. She used to work at the pineapple field. She became the singer, and she became this model for Saks Fifth, you know, hand model, head model. And you're going, what Filipina gets, you know, like in 1940 something, 50s? Didn't hear of it. So it's like, okay, so we really need to gather more information, you know, family myths, family stories. And what I say to people is like, look, I'm a storyteller, I'm an artist, I'm not a historian. So it doesn't even have to be true if it's in your family mythology. You know, let's just talk about it, because I'm not gonna go verbatim. I'm looking at composites of these stories. And so if you notice, for Manong, there's no white women in it, because I'm ripping off Helen Hilliera's story that they go to dance hall, and Greg's grandmother, who said Kearny Street was full of, or not full, but there were several clubs and businesses that were specifically catered to Filipinos. And I remember when I first came here, my grandfather, in the 60s, my grandfather would go to Kearny Street, and my grandmother would like really be jealous about and just really upset. So there are backstories that I want to talk about, and you know, some people